the 18th of October 71, Blanco Canyon, Texas. A freezing wind howls across the Llano Estacado as Colonel Reynold McKenzie, a battle-scarred Civil War hero, screams orders through the chaos. His men are reeling. 70 horses, including his prized gray pacer, just vanished in a midnight raid. Quanah Parker, the fierce Quahadi Comanche war chief, struck like a phantom, leaving Mackenzie's 600-man cavalry humiliated. This wasn't just a skirmish. It was a masterclass in guerrilla warfare by a tribe that had ruled the plains for 200 years. The Comanche didn't just fight, they dominated, outriding and outsmarting the U.S. Army with bows against rifles. Yet, in 4 short years, their world would collapse. 5 million buffalo slaughtered by 1874, their lifeline erased. McKenzie, obsessed and relentless, would burn their villages and shoot 1424 horses to break them. But was this conquest inevitable, or did the Comanche's own choices seal their fate? How did a half-white war chief and a 3-fingered colonel shape the end of America's most powerful tribe? Let's set the stage for a brutal clash on the American frontier. Colonel Reynold McKenzie, a 31-year-old Union Army veteran of the Civil War, is a battle-scarred soldier who fought at Antietam, Gettysburg, and saw Lee surrender at Appomattox in 1865. Known as Bad Hand to native tribes and 3-fingered Jack to his men, after losing 2 fingers to a shell fragment in 1863, McKenzie is obsessed with crushing the Comanche after a humiliating defeat in the 18th of October 71. His enemy is the Quahadi Comanche, the last free and most ferocious band, led by War Chief Quanah Parker. This towering leader, who loathed white settlers invading his land, drove decades of raids, horse thefts, murders, and tortures along the Texas-Mexico frontier. Weeks before Mackenzie's failure, frontier settlers begged the military to stop the Quahadi's relentless attacks. The battleground is the Llano Estacado, a vast, trackless grassland on the high plains. Scorching in summer, it hides water sources that can mean life or death. In fall and winter, northern's sudden storms plummet temperatures 50 degrees in hours, bringing fierce winds, sleet, or snow. This harsh land, nearly uninhabitable, is where the Quahadi thrive, using its secrets to evade enemies. In the 18th of October 71, McKenzie led 600 cavalry and 20 Tonkawa scouts, sworn enemies of the Comanche, into the Llano Estacado to capture a Quahadi village. Success would have crippled them and women, children, horses, and supplies, but Quanah outmaneuvered him. At midnight, Comanche warriors stampeded 70 horses, including Mackenzie's prized gray pacer. The next day, they ambushed his men, killing Private Sienna Gregg. McKenzie pursued the village, watching the Comanche shed buffalo robes and lodge poles to escape. Just as he closed in, a norther struck freezing rain and gale-force winds forced him to retreat, to save his men from freezing, 50 miles from supplies. The Quahadi slipped away. On the return march, McKenzie took an arrow to the thigh, while cornering 2 Comanche stragglers, who died refusing surrender. That failure fueled his obsession to return and defeat Quanah Parker. For 2 centuries before 1867, the Comanche ruled as the most powerful Native American tribe in North America. On the open plains, nobody could touch them. Their secret? Unmatched skill in mounted warfare. Colonel Richard Dodge, a U.S. military commander in the 1870s, called them the finest light cavalry in the world, better than any mounted soldiers in Europe or America. That's no small praise. George Catlin, an artist and writer who traveled the plains in the 1830s, saw it too. He described the Comanche as slovenly and unattractive on foot, but the second they swung onto their horses, they transformed. He called them the most extraordinary horsemen he'd ever seen, and he'd seen a lot. On horseback, they were a force of nature. What set the Comanche apart was how they fought. Unlike other tribes, even skilled horsemen like the Lakota who mixed foot and mounted combat, the Comanche did it all from the saddle. They were master archers, firing arrows with deadly precision while riding at full gallop. It was a style that left their enemies, American soldiers included, stunned and scrambling. The Comanche weren't one single group. They had 5 main bands, each with its own territory and traits. The Penateca, or honey eaters, lived southernmost and clashed early with Texans. By the 1850s, disease and relentless assaults had crushed them. The Yamparica, meaning yap eaters, the Noconi, known as wanderers, and the Katsoteca, or buffalo eaters, were next to face the encroaching whites. Most of these bands, or at least parts of them, showed up to sign the Medicine Lodge Treaty in 1867, agreeing to reservations under pressure. But the Quahadi, the Antelope Band, were different. They were the most remote, the most brutal, and they wanted no part of any treaty. Living deep in the Llano Estacado, they stayed free, fierce, and untamed. In the 18th of October 67, the U.S. government called a meeting in Kansas that would change the fate of the Plains tribes. The Medicine Lodge Treaty wasn't a friendly negotiation. It was a hard ultimatum. Comanche, Kiowa, and other tribes were told to stop all warfare against white settlers, move to designated reservations away from white settlements, and give up their way of life. In return, they'd get food, seeds, education, and other supplies. Refuse, and the U.S. military would make them comply by force. The post-Civil War army was smaller, but the growing raids on the frontier left the government no patience for free-roaming tribes. At the center of this moment was Ten Bears, a Yamparica Comanche chief in his late 70s. He stood up and gave one of the most powerful speeches ever recorded from a Native American leader. He blamed white soldiers for starting the conflict, saying they were the first to send troops and kill Comanche warriors. He spoke of his people's grief, cutting their hair to mourn the fallen, and how they struck back, taking scalps and captives. Ten Bears rejected the idea of being confined to reservations, saying his people were born on the prairie, hunted buffalo, and wanted to live and die there as their ancestors did. The thought of trading their free life for farming and American-built houses infuriated the younger warriors, who wouldn't hear of it. Ten Bears wasn't naive. Years earlier, he'd traveled to Washington, D.C., and seen the overwhelming size and power of the United States. He knew the Comanche, numbering maybe 5,000 total, couldn't hold out forever. So, despite his fiery words, he put his mark on the treaty alongside 9 other chiefs. But he also knew he couldn't control the young warriors, and one band, the Quahadi, wasn't even there. The Quahadi, the most remote and defiant Comanche, skipped the meeting entirely. If the U.S. wanted their submission, they'd have to track them down in their stronghold, the unforgiving Llano Estacado, and force it. Quanah Parker, born in 1845, was a force to be reckoned with, a man shaped by a life of conflict and loss. His father was Peta Nocona, a Comanche chief, and his mother was Cynthia Ann Parker, a white girl kidnapped at 9 during the Parker Fort Massacre in 1836. Cynthia Ann wasn't just a captive, she fully became Comanche, adopted into the tribe, marrying Peta Nocona, and raising a family. Quanah was their son, a half-white warrior who'd grow to lead the Quahadi with unmatched ferocity. Cynthia Ann's life took a tragic turn in the 18th of December 60 at the Battle of Pease River. U.S. forces recaptured her and her infant daughter, Prairie Flower, tearing her from her Comanche family after 25 years. She'd been a wife, a mother, a full member of the tribe, but the whites saw her as a rescued captive. She never wanted to leave, and her forced return broke her spirit. For Quanah, losing his mother and sister fueled a burning hatred for the white settlers invading his homeland, Comancheria. His father, Peta Nocona, likely died around this time, possibly from war wounds, leaving Quanah with even more reason to fight. By his teams, he was a Quahadi warrior, rising fast to become their most influential war leader, leading raids to drive out the settlers threatening his people's way of life. One early show of Comanche strength came in the 18th of November 64 at the First Battle of Adobe Walls. Over 1,400 Comanche and Kiowa warriors, possibly including a teenage Quanah, clashed with 300 U.S. soldiers led by famed Indian fighter Kit Carson in the Texas Panhandle. The tribes were furious about wagon trains on the Santa Fe Trail killing buffalo, their lifeblood. In a fierce fight, the warriors forced Carson's troops to retreat, proving the plains still belonged to them. For Quanah, this victory cemented his resolve to resist the whites at all costs, setting the stage for his leadership in the brutal years ahead. In May 1871, tension boiled over at Fort Richardson, Texas. Jack County settlers, fed up with years of terror, met with General William T. Sherman, presenting a petition listing 129 murders by Plains tribes over the past decade. These weren't just numbers, these were neighbors, family, lives torn apart by raids. The settlers demanded action, and the air was thick with their desperation. Colonel Reynold McKenzie was there, watching closely. A Civil War hero who fought at Antietam, Gettysburg, and stood at Appomattox when Lee surrendered in 1865, he was now 31 and leading the 4th Cavalry. His men called him Three-Fingered Jack, a nod to the 2 fingers he lost to a shell fragment in 1863. Battle-scarred and impatient, McKenzie was itching to take on the tribes terrorizing the frontier. That same day, May 18, 1871, news of a brutal attack hit the fort. At Salt Creek Prairie, halfway between Fort Richardson and Fort Belknap, over 100 Kiowa and Comanche warriors ambushed a 12-wagon train carrying flour and cornmeal. The wagon leader, Henry Warren, tried to form a defensive ring, but it was no use. The warriors overwhelmed them, killing 7 men. 5 escaped, but the scene was horrific. 5 mules lay dead. 5 men's heads split open, their bodies mutilated. 2 others were cut down fleeing. Worst of all, 1 man was strapped to a wagon wheel, his tongue cut out, and burned alive, likely while still breathing. McKenzie, sent to investigate, reported the grim details to Sherman, confirming the settlers' worst fears. Ironically, the same war party had passed up attacking Sherman's small group earlier that day, swayed by a Kiowa medicine man's advice. This near miss, combined with the massacre's savagery, flipped Sherman's stance. He'd been focused on President Grant's peace policy, but no more. Diplomacy was dead. He declared all Plains Indians, not on reservations, enemies of the United States, and tasked McKenzie with hunting down the raiders. For McKenzie, this was the green light he'd been waiting for, to go after the tribes, especially the Quahadi, with full force. In the 18th of September 71, Colonel Reynold McKenzie launched a bold campaign to crush the Quahadi Comanche. Leading 600 cavalry and 20 Tonkawa scouts, fierce enemies of the Comanche, marched into the Llano Estacado, determined to track down the elusive band on their home turf. The stakes were high. Capturing the Quahadi could end their reign of terror on the frontier. Early October brought McKenzie to Blanco Canyon, a 30-mile valley near the White River in northern Texas. At first, no Comanche were found, but the Tonkawa spotted their scouts watching from afar. That night, around midnight, Quanah Parker struck. With war whoops piercing the dark, his warriors raided McKenzie's camp, stampeding 70 horses, including McKenzie's prized gray pacer. The chaos left soldiers grappling with rearing animals that tore free and vanished. No soldiers died, but the loss of mounts was a gut punch. The next morning, McKenzie sent Lieutenant Robert Carter and a small group to recover the horses. Spotting Comanche rounding them up, Carter's men gave chase, only to fall into a trap. Hundreds of warriors, led by Quanah and painted for war, swarmed from a bluff, wearing buffalo bonnets and feathered headdresses. Carter's men, armed with lever-action Spencer carbines, held them off briefly, but the Comanche charged closer. As Private Sienna Gregg's horse tired, Quanah rode up, raised a pistol, and shot him dead in the head, his carbine jammed and useless. Just as the warriors closed in, dust on the horizon signaled McKenzie's main force arriving, drawn by gunshots. Quanah and his men retreated up the bluff, saving Carter's group from annihilation. McKenzie now realized he'd stumbled on an entire Quahadi village, women, children, thousands of horses, and supplies. He pursued, tracking them across the plains. The Comanche, desperate to escape, dropped buffalo robes, lodge poles, and other gear to lighten their load. McKenzie was closing in, victory within reach. But then a norther struck. A sudden gale from the north brought black clouds, freezing rain, and winds that stiffened the soldiers' clothes. 50 miles from supplies, McKenzie had no choice but to call off the chase to save his men from freezing. The Quahadi vanished into the storm. On the humiliating return march, McKenzie's men cornered 2 Comanche stragglers in brush and boulders. Leading the charge, furious and reckless, McKenzie screamed orders until an arrow from a hidden spot lodged in his thigh. His soldiers unleashed a volley of rifle fire, killing the warriors who refused surrender. Already scarred from past battles, McKenzie shrugged off the wound, but the sting of this defeat horses lost. A village escaped, and an arrow to show for it burned deep. Blanco Canyon was a lesson, and McKenzie wouldn't forget it. For years, the Comanche held a deadly edge on the plains. Their bows, fired with lethal precision from horseback, outmatched the slow muzzle-loading rifles of white soldiers. Once those rifles were emptied, reloading under pressure was a nightmare, leaving soldiers vulnerable to the Comanche's rapid attacks. But by the 1840s, things started to shift. Colt revolvers, adopted by groups like the Texas Rangers, changed the game with their quick-firing rates, matching the speed of Comanche bows. By 1871, McKenzie's men wielded lever-action Spencer carbines, which could fire multiple rounds without reloading, further eroding the Comanche's advantage. Then came the Sharps rifles, known as buffalo guns. These long-range beasts, with effective ranges over 1,000 yards, more than half a mile at White's, engaged Comanche from distances they couldn't counter. The Comanche, reliant on close-range archery and mobility, struggled to adapt to this new threat. Worse still was the buffalo crisis. Between 1871 and 1872, hide hunters slaughtered 5 million buffalo, driven by a booming demand for high-grade leather. Armed with Sharps rifles, these hunters decimated herds that once roamed the plains by the millions. Buffalo were slow, easy targets, and their hides were big business. The Comanche depended on buffalo for food, shelter, clothing, everything. But megafauna like buffalo don't recover quickly. By 1874, the herds were nearly extinct, leaving the Comanche desperate. Without their primary resource, their way of life was collapsing, pushing them closer to a breaking point. In 1872, Colonel Reynold McKenzie retooled his approach after the Blanco Canyon fiasco. He adopted a scorched-earth strategy, determined to beat the Comanche at their own game. The Llano Estacado, a vast, unforgiving grassland the size of Ohio, was deemed an unlivable wasteland by whites. Yet, the Comanche thrived there. McKenzie decided if they could survive, so could his men. He sent soldiers to traverse and map the entire region, creating detailed guides to navigate its trackless expanse, aiming to hunt the Comanche where they lived. This new strategy paid off at the Battle of North Fork in 1872. McKenzie tracked down a village led by Chief Maui, known as Shaking Hand. Striking hard, his forces killed over 20 Comanche, captured 100 prisoners, and seized about 50 horses. It was a major blow, showcasing McKenzie's growing ability to operate in the Comanche's domain. But the victory wasn't clean. McKenzie failed to secure the captured horses, and Comanche warriors slipped in and took them all back. This stung, reinforcing that he needed sharper tactics to hold what he won. McKenzie's obsession was taking a toll. Old war wounds sparked rheumatism, making him increasingly irritable. His patience wore thin, and he snapped at soldiers, even threatening to shoot those who disobeyed. The constant stress and physical pain fueled his drive, but also showed a man stretched to his limits, hell-bent on crushing the Comanche no matter the cost. By 1874, the Comanche were backed into a corner. The buffalo, their lifeline for food and shelter, were nearly wiped out. Raids had cost them dearly, with key figures like Lone Wolf's son, a Kiowa chief, and Quanah Parker's nephew killed. Desperate and with little left to lose, the Comanche, Kiowa, and Cheyenne banded together for one final stand against the encroaching whites. Enter Izzatai, a Quahadi medicine man who claimed extraordinary powers, raising the dead, controlling the weather, even making his followers immune to bullets. His bold promises rallied the tribes, giving them hope in a dark time. To unify the warriors, Izzatai introduced the sun dance, a multi-day ritual borrowed from other tribes. Unlike traditional Comanche practices, it involved fasting and enduring pain, signaling a new era of resistance and spiritual renewal. On the 27th of June, 1874, Quanah Parker led nearly 700 warriors, Comanche, Kiowa, and Cheyenneito attack Adobe Walls, a small buffalo hunter settlement in the Texas Panhandle. Only 28 hunters were present, but they were armed and awake. The warriors, adorned with war paint, feathers, and buffalo hide shields, charged at dawn, expecting a quick victory. But the hunters' long-range Sharps rifles, deadly at over 1,000 yards, stopped them cold. The initial assault failed, and the warriors regrouped at a safer distance. On the third day, hunter Billy Dixon made a legendary shot, killing a Comanche warrior at 1,500 yards, a record witnessed by both sides. The Comanche excelled at hit-and-run raids, not siege warfare. Trapping the hunters for days didn't suit their style, and they couldn't breach the fortified buildings. Izzatai's credibility crumbled when he refused to approach within rifle range, undermining his claim of bulletproof power. He later blamed a Cheyenne warrior for killing a skunk, saying it tainted his medicine. The battle cost an estimated 30 warriors, with 15 bodies left behind, too close to the hunters' guns to recover. Quanah himself was wounded by a ricochet, a painful reminder of their failure. The Second Battle of Adobe Walls was a disaster for the tribes. It shattered their hopes and provoked the U.S. military, led by Colonel McKenzie, to launch the Red River War, a campaign to crush the remaining Plains tribes once and for all. The Red River War, launched in summer 1874, aimed to crush the remaining 3,000 Comanche, mostly in the Texas Panhandle. The U.S. military deployed forces from 4 directions to trap them. Colonel Nelson Miles moved south from Fort Dodge in the north. 2 units advanced west from Fort Sill and east from Fort Bascom, and Colonel Reynold McKenzie pushed north from Fort Concho in the south. The strategy was anti-guerrilla, using continuous patrols and permanent supply bases to maintain firepower. By targeting Comanche families and resources, the campaign sought to force surrender or destruction, refusing to let the tribes slip away. On the 28th of September, 1874, McKenzie led 600 soldiers and 32 Tonkawa scouts into Palo Duro Canyon, ready to strike. Learning from Blanco Canyon, he had horses' legs tied to prevent stampedes. After extracting the village's location from a tortured Comanchero trader and confirming it with Tonkawa scouts, McKenzie moved in. The Comanche, misled by a Kiowa chief's false claim of safety, posted no watchmen and slept in. McKenzie's forces descended a narrow pass undetected and attacked at dawn. The Comanche mounted a desperate resistance to shield their fleeing families, but, outnumbered and outgunned, they were overwhelmed. They abandoned their lodges, leaving buffalo robes, dried meat, and reservation-supplied goods, flour, calico, ammunition. McKenzie ordered the village burned, destroying all winter supplies. His men pursued the fleeing Comanche for 4 miles, killing 4 warriors. To ensure the Comanche couldn't recover, McKenzie commanded the slaughter of 1,424 captured horses, sparing only a few for scouts. Piles of horse bones marked the canyon, a stark symbol of the blow. While only 4 warriors died, the loss of supplies and mounts left the Quahadi crippled, unable to survive the coming winter, sealing their fate. By early 1875, the Plains tribes were crumbling. Lone Wolf's Kiowa surrendered in February, followed by 1,000 Southern Cheyenne in March. Yet Quanah Parker's Quahadi, with just 400 people and 100 warriors, held out on the Llano Estacado, clinging to their freedom despite the loss of buffalo and supplies. Colonel Reynold McKenzie, now commanding Fort Sill, shifted to diplomacy. In May 1875, he sent Wild Horse, a surrendered Comanche chief, to negotiate with Quanah. After a 2-day council, Quanah agreed to surrender. His decision was shaped by a vision during meditation. A wolf howled and ran toward Fort Sill, and an eagle swooped in the same direction. Quanah saw this as the Great Spirit's sign to end resistance. From May to the 18th of June 75, the Quahadi made their final journey to Fort Sill, hunting along the way to savor their last moments of freedom. With no buffalo left to sustain their way of life, their world was gone. On the 2nd of June, 1875, they arrived at Fort Sill, where McKenzie greeted them warmly. In a surprising act of kindness, he tried to reunite Quanah with his mother, Cynthia Ann Parker, only to learn she had died in 1871, devastated by the loss of her daughter, Prairie Flower. In 1864, Quanah was heartbroken but grateful for McKenzie's effort. In a gesture of respect, Quanah offered to return the prized gray pacer he'd stolen from McKenzie in Blanco Canyon in 1871. McKenzie declined, a moment that sparked an unexpected friendship between the 2 former enemies. The Quahadi's surrender marked the end of their resistance, closing a chapter of Comanche dominance on the plains. Quanah Parker adapted swiftly to reservation life, becoming chief of all Comanche, not just the Quahadi. He thrived as a rancher, building a successful new path. His charisma and pragmatism led to a remarkable friendship with Theodore Roosevelt, whom he joined at the 1901 presidential inauguration and on a wolf hunt. Quanah lived until the 23rd of February, 1911, dying at 66, a respected leader who bridged 2 worlds. Reynold McKenzie's career peaked with a promotion to brigadier general in 1882, but tragedy struck in the 1880s. A severe head injury from a wagon fall left him mentally unstable. Declared insane, he retired in 1884 and died on the 26th of January, 1889. Despite his brutal campaigns, McKenzie's time commanding Fort Sill revealed a softer side. He worked with Quanah to improve reservation conditions, teaching him white customs and showing compassion that contrasted his earlier ruthlessness. The Comanche, once the most feared tribe on the plains, fell from dominance to reservation life, their power broken by McKenzie's relentless pursuit. His victories, especially at Palo Duro Canyon, ended their ability to resist. Yet, the bond between McKenzie and Quanah stands out, a complex alliance born from conflict. 2 adversaries, one a driven soldier, the other a defiant warrior, became unlikely allies, working together to navigate a new reality for the Comanche.